Peace, and welcome to another episode of the Quranic Remedies, where we spend about 15 minutes exploring a page from the Quran together and seeing how we can apply the verses to our lives. Hopefully, with God's permission, it helps us heal our brain, body, mind, and soul. So today we'll be reading from chapter 2, the cow, from verses 106 all the way to 112. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge to God from the accursed devil. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسيها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها. ألم تعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير. Whatever we transcribed of a sign or caused it to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or the like of it. Do you not know that God is capable of all things? A different word for transcribed here could be abrogated. ألم تعلم أن الله له ملك السماوات والأرض وما لكم من دون الله من ولي ولا نصير. Do you not know that to God belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and you have no guardians nor helper beside God? أم تريدون أن تسألوا رسولكم كما سئل موسى من قبل ومن يتبدل الكفر بالإيمان فقد ضل سواء السبيل. Or do you intend to ask your messenger as Moses was asked before? But whoever exchanges the faith for disbelief, then he has strayed from the straight way. ود كثير من أهل الكتاب لو يردونكم من بعد إيمانكم كفارا حسدا من عند أنفسهم من بعد ما تبين لهم الحق فاعفوا واصفحوا حتى يأتي الله بأمره إن الله على كل شيء قدير. And many of the people of the book wish they could revert you to disbelievers after your faith out of envy from their souls, after what has become clear to them of the truth. So excuse and pardon until God brings His command. Indeed, God is capable of all things. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَمَا تُقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُم مِّن خَيْرٍ تَجِدُوهُ عِندَ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. So establish the litany and give the charity, and whatever you send forth from your souls of good, you will find it with God. Indeed, God is cognizant of what you do. وَقَالُوا لَن يَدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةَ إِلَّا مَنْ كَانَ هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى تِلْكَ أَمَانِيُّهُمْ قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. And they said, no one will enter the garden except one who is a Jew or a Christian. These are their desires. Say, bring your proof if you are truthful. بَلَا مَنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهُ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ فَلَهُ أَجْرَهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Indeed, whoever submits his aim to God while being benevolent, then he will have his reward at his Lord, and there will be no fear upon them, nor will they grieve. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. God, the Great, has said the truth. So these verses start with a continuation with addressing the believers and also setting an example for anyone else who's reading the book. Yes, the word here, nansakh, can be explained in two ways, depending on the context. The translator here, Shu'aib Abdullahi, from the Great Quran translation, he opted to use transcribe. Transcribe as in write something down. Personally, I do believe the context here is saying abrogation. So abrogation is something that is highly debated in society, especially within the followers of Prophet Muhammad. But the concept of abrogation isn't for you to find guidance outside somewhere else. Whatever has been abrogated from the Quran, you no longer find it because it have either been forgotten or it has been abrogated. And God says that if He causes a verse or a sign to be forgotten, right, or if He removes it, abrogates it, He brings something like of it or better than it. So there is no way it's very clear that there is nothing that is abrogated where it goes against what was first said. So whenever you're having debates per se or discussions with people who talk about the abrogation from the Quran, it's very clear and it's very important to remind them that God is going to bring something better or something like of it. So I'll give you a quick example. If God is saying that you have to write a will for your parents before you are deceased, if you're coming close to death, and if someone comes to you and says, no, that's abrogated, now you're not allowed to write a will for your parents. Well, that's not something like it or better. That's something less of value. That's something worse. So God's not going to abrogate His verses with something that is of a lesser quality. But to explain abrogation for you in a certain way, the goal doesn't necessarily change, but the way that you're achieving the goal, that might be changing. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that God has told you to get from point A to point B, but He told you to take this route to get to your road, right? And you've been taking this route all for a very long time. And then at this point now, there needs to be a detour because this route is no longer safe for you or this route is no longer available. So God would order you to still go from point A to point B, but He gave you a quicker and an easier route. And now this is the route that you need to take to the point to reach your destination. So the actual goal hasn't changed. You're still reaching the destination you need to change to reach that God has told you to, but the style of you achieving the goal has been modified, right? So this is a quick way for me to explain to myself what abrogation is. But it's not healthy for you to sit there and talk about debates of what was abrogated from the Quran, because nobody knows. In this day and age, no one really knows what has been abrogated. Because if it's been forgotten, abrogated, you will no longer find it in the Quran. And any verse that is sitting in the Quran currently, these are all to be learned from, to be taken from, and to be considered. And if it has a law or a rule, it needs to be applied. This is how you make humanity better for everybody. Now, after the what God has said about the abrogation, God is asking you very clearly, do you not know that God has everything that's in the skies and the land? But the word that I want you to focus on here is at the end, that you do not have, without God, like there is no helper or a guardian, right? Or a victor or an ally to you without God. And I mean, like, no one's going to be able to avail you. No one's going to be able to, like, protect you. No one's able to take care of you other than God. It's an impossibility. Because you might think that your parents are taking care of you now. But if a storm comes in and starts to shake your house, your parents can't do anything. You might think your government is helping you right now. But if an asteroid is coming close to Earth and it's about to hit the Earth, they can't help you, can they? So who's the only one who can really protect you and give you guardianship? Let's say you have the best farmers in your city, but if God chooses not to bring the water down, or if the water doesn't appear the way that it's supposed to be, you can't get fed. So the only entity that you can really trust and rely on is God. And the beautiful part is a lot of people, they because of the negative circumstances that happen in people's day-to-day life, so they think, well, yeah, I rely on God, but I'm worried, so I have to protect myself and I have to do this like obscene risk management, and I don't want to talk to too many people. Why? Because I might get in trouble. Well, then at that point, you don't think God is going to protect you. And that's something that's very important to remember, that going out of your comfort zone to do what is right, you always have to know that God is going to protect you. Even if you get into a little bit of pain, a little bit of hurt, you are going to scathe free by the end of it. Because even if they put you in the grave, you're going back to your Lord, and your Lord is going to reward you multiple times. But personally, in like the group of believers I talk to, anytime we are put into a situation where we are being tested because of what we expressed from God's verses that the person in front of us didn't like, God really rescued us. God helped us. Like, there were so many times it was supposed to be a physical confrontation because the person would just not understand, and it just suddenly stops, like out of nowhere, and then we're rescued. So always trust on God. He is your victor and He is your guardian. And now that you are going into the faith and you're believing in God, don't ask questions that are going to get you in trouble, that you know exactly that it's wrong, because that question itself is a sign of disbelief, right? So we can debate on what Moses was asked before, right? Like, one thing that was asked of Moses is show us God directly. That's something that was in this chapter. You can't ask to go see God directly, because that's the test. You have to believe in the unseen. Do you believe God exists? Because when God reveals Himself, it's game over. And at that point, if you didn't believe so, it doesn't matter that you believe at that point. But there's other verses where God's saying that the people of Moses, around Moses, they asked Moses to build them a fake calf, like something for them to worship. Do you want that? Is it difficult for you to not believe in God, that you need to set up something as a memory of Him, as if you can't remember Him when He's technically all around you in all aspects? You just cannot see Him? Or the other questions that they've been asked to Moses is when they had something good, they ask for something that's lower. So you shouldn't ask for things that you know is wrong. That if you heard someone else saying it, you would say to yourself, like, this is crazy. You shouldn't be asking this. But it's very easy to judge others and to forget ourselves because we're not in that position. Everyone's a backseat driver, as they say. But when you're driving, you might forget yourself and you might not be judging yourself the same way you're judging others. So it's very important for you to know which questions you're asking and why you're asking them. If you're asking them just so that you could get to be lazy or to make things easy or because you're full of doubt, then your question is a form of disbelief at this point. And at that point, you're moving away from the faith and you're moving closer to disbelief. Now, and this is a topic that is very, which is going to get covered in detail later. The Quran is very binary in nature. So God is giving you two categories, which are usually opposites. Okay, believer, disbeliever. Okay, and then it's very binary, where in a sense, God is not really talking about the scale that's in between it. But nobody's 100% a believer other than God, and nobody's a 100% disbeliever either, because some people realize some of the signs from God. But it's which side of this, the two classifications that you're closer to, is what your judgment is. If you're 51% believer, you would fall on the scale as a believer, not a very good believer, but you're still a believer. And if you're 51% closer to disbelief, then you're a disbeliever. That's how I always viewed the Quran, is in a sense where God is talking in binary. If you do this, thus you are this. And if you don't do this, then you are this. It's very extremely binary, right? But it's very important to judge the people based on how much you're seeing of what God is explaining. So if a person shows one concept where he is revealing himself as somewhat of a hypocrite, well, forgive him, because 8 out of 10 times he was saying what he was doing and he was being honest. But the 2 times where he did have a sign of hypocrisy does not make him a hypocrite at this point. And that's something that you have to be very aware of when you're making judgment on people based on verses of God. Also, God is talking about a certain group of people, which you will always find. They're always talking to you, might be nicely. Maybe they come to you in ways where you could sense the arrogance of them, where they rather you sit there and talk about what they're talking about and give it importance or credence, even though it's complete nonsense. And this applies to a lot of groups. Oh yeah, I could see you're talking about God. Yeah, that's excellent. But what about these concepts? Why? Like, you should accept these concepts. And then you tell them, like, well, these concepts are contradictory, or these concepts are made up by an individual. I don't need. And they'll think to themselves, like, yeah, he said right, but I don't like him. Well, why don't you like him? Because he's not part of my cult. Well, why don't you leave your cult? Well, because this is what's important to me. So at that point, the person is clearly jealous, because you are someone of a better, more stable mind than he is. He understands what you're saying. He sees it. He's making sense of it. He cannot disprove it in his mind. But his only option is, I don't believe it. I don't choose to accept it. I see it. It makes sense. Proper interpretation. Yes, it goes against what I believe, but I won't accept it. Well, that's craziness at that point. God tells you at this point, especially with the people of the book who claim that they believe in God, to try to show as much pardoning and mercy to them, and when the time is right. And you will know when the time is right. When a command from God comes for you to act back to them in a certain method that they're acting to you, God is fully supporting you at this time. Because you've warned them multiple times. You've showed them the proof multiple times. You've tried to express to them, but they still come at you with words and that are not suitable in discussion, or they might come at you in a physical nature. However it is, the more you start pardoning, forgiving, and when you know the command of God came and then you react, well, God is capable of all things. And when that command comes, they're in trouble, and they know that they're in trouble. God then goes on by telling the believers to establish again, this is said again, to establish the litany, the prayer, and to give charity. Because you establishing the prayer, connecting with God in the physical ritual and in the metaphysical sense, it stops you from being an evil person, a corrupted person, and it stops you from corrupting in the land. You praying is good for yourself and is good for humanity. Okay, that is the only thing that is keeping you a proper barrier for caring for others and caring for yourselves and nurturing this relationship that you have with God. And you giving from what you have been given, the purification, that is also good for humanity. You will be making this world a better place in both of those things. And God clearly says to you that even the little things matter. You doing just a little bit of good for somebody where they didn't even notice. Okay, so let's say you're walking down the street and somebody forgot the trunk of his car open, right? You go closing it, and that night the water came down from the skies and his car didn't get wet from the inside. He might have never known. He might have not have been aware. But God knows, and God will reward you, and that man will be very thankful on the day of judgment that you saved him a lot of problems. These are concepts that are very important where the little things matter. So if you noticed it and you did it, God also noticed it and God helped you in doing it. So thank God for giving us the ability to strive in His way and let us recognize things for us to do. That's the blessing and favor from God. Now we go into something that for some reason, like all the people that read the Quran, they just don't get this clear concept that's here. You are not entitled to heaven just because you're part of a group. You can't say that none of the Christians or Jews are going to hell, or none of the Christians and Jews are going to heaven either, just because you are now reading a book that came after them. So let me be very clear. There's a lot of people that say that our group is going to heaven and no one else is going to heaven. This is what the Jews and the Christians say. They say that, hey, well, if you're not a Jew, you're not a Christian, you don't get to heaven. Well, where's your proof? Because you're saying lies, so show me your proof. And this is something that you have to always tackle the people when it comes down to having a theological debate on what is the truth or what is reality and who is God and not. If they're saying something, well, produce your proof. If they run to a different book outside of the books of God, well, that's not a proper proof, right? That's somebody else's word, somebody else's interpretation. Show me the proof that God said so. Show me the proof where it says that Shias are going to heaven or that Sunnis are going to heaven. Oh, well, we have these other books that were written by people saying like, hey, the Prophet said that only Muslims will go to heaven now. Well, in the right sense of a word, yes, only Muslims will go to heaven. But that does not mean that only Sunnis go to heaven. Because God clearly states, we already read verses where God is going to put some Christians and Jews and other religions in heaven. So you taking that exclusivity, like making heaven exclusive to yourself is a sin. Because you don't know. God is telling you clearly here that whoever dedicates himself, his will, he puts his aim back to God, okay? And he's concentrating and he's submissive to God. Even if he had no idea what like one letter of the Quran said. If he's never read the Quran and he's alive in this day and age. Because he was not able to be pushed to it, nor did he have the language. But if he was submissive to God, that he recognized that I need to do my part to make this world better, and that he is relying on his Lord, why wouldn't that person go to heaven? Why do you need to put him on a standard that you yourself isn't always meeting? Because God is extremely merciful. God is extremely aware, and God is extremely benevolent. So he understands his servants very well. If the person is really well intended, okay, and he's not part of a religious, there's only one religion, but he's not part of a cult-like mentality, and he's not adhering to people's personal affiliation to what God is. If he is taking it in a sincere way, why would God not put him in heaven? That's something that's something that you should constantly be aware about. Those people that come and make claims that only this group of people are going to heaven, that's an action and that's a word that's not going to put them in heaven. Well, God will put him in heaven if he wants. But that's going to be against them on the day of judgment. Because the Quran is clearly saying, like, here's an example of the Jews and the Christians that do this. They don't know. They're lying. They don't have proof of that. Well, not you guys, but there's people that do the same thing, who read the same book. Only one sect of Sunnism is going to come to heaven, and everyone else is going to go to hell. No, you don't have. Show me your proof. Our proof is because someone said so. Well, that's not God saying that. Show me where God is telling you about 73 sects and only one sect is going to heaven. Well, we don't want to talk about that. Well, because if you want to submit to God, means that the word of God is the one that trumps. That is what proper submission is. And that's how God gets to judge between us. You've heard something when you were born as a child, that someone told you something and attributed it to an individual. And then you have a book that you can clearly see from God. Why would I go with the what if, right? Why would I go with an assumption when I have the best judge, the best book that will tell me all the answers? So with that said, I'm sorry for the delay for the last couple of days. I'm trying to push along with some of my schedules, but I hope you guys are enjoying this. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. All praise to God, the Lord of the worlds. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace and blessings upon you all.